So this is really interesting to me because from what I can tell, the fandom, like the Tolkien fandom, seems to think that the choice to become mortal or stay like immortal, I guess, that choice has something to do with your breeding, who your parents are. If you happen to have like an elf parent and a human parent, you then have to make some choices when you get older. But now that I'm really sitting and thinking about it, I do not think that that's the case. I think that it has to do not with your breeding, but with how you as a character interact with the divine. And the reason why I think this is because Elrond and Elros are actually a really classic example of characters who have to choose between being an elf and being a human because of their breeding, because of who their ancestors were. On their mother's side, their mother is Elwing, who is the grandchild of Beren and Luthien, famed interracial elf-human couple. But on their dad's side, they're also half-elven. Erendil's parents are Tuor and Idril, and Tuor is Turin Turambar's cousin. Fuck that guy. He ends up going to Gondolin, marries Idril. This is Turgon's daughter. They don't get like as much clout, I guess, in the main story. Like there is no like Lay of Leithian size story about Tuor and Idril. It's more like the fall of Gondolin, like, and they're just like a part of it rather than their story necessarily driving the fall of Gondolin, that kind of thing. But they are just as human and elf as Beren and Luthien. The only thing that they're missing is Luthien's divine Mayan heritage. She has divine heritage that Idril doesn't have. Idril just happens to be a member of the House of Finwë because of Turgon. This leads to Erendil and Elwing eventually meeting and marrying and having children. And Erendil's like, hey, like, we gotta deal with all of this, like, Morgoth stuff. Like, something has to give. So he builds a ship. He takes his wife with him. They go to Valinor, and they're both half-elven. They're not half-elven, like, they're half-elven, like, by heritage. It kind of seems like they, like, if they had not made this journey to Valinor, if they had not gotten into their spaceship and flown around with the Silmaril in space, that I don't think a choice would have had to have been made for them, right? Because it's not like Dior got to make a choice. It was more like Beren and Luthien, like, they had Dior. Dior is a half-elf, just like Elrond and Elros. There's nothing to be said about the choices that Dior made, like to be an elf or to be a human or not. Like, that never came up. A generation or so later, Erendil and Elwing, they have to make the choice, but not necessarily because of their heritage. It's because they are not divine, and they have like their human blood and all of that, and they've just stepped onto divine land. Like, they're not supposed to do that. The Valar make the world round after this. Like, this had never been done before and will never be done again. So at that point, they're like, okay, like, we can let you live. Like, thanks for the heads up about Morgoth. Like, we're gonna help deal with that. We're gonna make the world round, all that stuff. But you guys can't go back because you guys have already been here. So you have choices to make. So Erendil and Elwing, they chose to be elves. They get in the spaceship. They fly through space. Elrond and Elros choose their fates because of their parents. I don't think it had anything to do with them specifically being half-elven, because if that was the case, Dior would have needed to make that choice, or there would have been something on the page saying that Dior made that choice, but he didn't. And that tells me that there really isn't like a hard and fast rule that like all half-elven people have to make this choice eventually. It's more like, if you're a half-elf and you do something to brush up against the divine, or you are the direct offspring of a parent who brushes up against the divine the way Erendil and Elwing did, then you have to make the choice. Luthien makes the choice not because she's a half-elf. She makes the choice because she brushes up against the divine. She goes to Mandos to try to get Beren back. That's why she makes the choice. Tuor also gets a choice. Like, Tuor is like the only human to be counted among the elves, the way that Luthien is the only elf to have ever died like a human. But I feel like Tuor and Idril kind of lucked out a little bit here, because I think there is such a thing as like bringing balance to the force or balance to the universe. I think if Luthien is an elf person and she got to experience human death, I think that the universe, there's like a push and pull there, and like death would have needed to give something back, and death got the opportunity with Tuor, which leaves Erendiel and Elwing's union. And this is also very like surreptitious, because Elwing and Erendiel are both themselves descendant from legendary interracial relationships. So really, I think this all had to come together heritage-wise here, and that's why they're making the choice, and why their children had to make the choice along with them. But I don't necessarily think they would have had to make this choice while they were alive if Erendiel and Elwing had not met the Valar, had not built their spaceship. I will say I am not necessarily like the biggest expert on this. I just really love this book, and I love all of the ideas in it. So like maybe like don't necessarily take me as like the final word on this. Maybe there is something in like an unfinished tale that I'm missing, but I always personally figured that the choice about becoming mortal or becoming an elf or whatever really does not have that much to do with whether a person is half elven or not, because if that were the case, Dior would have made a choice and Luthien and Tuor would not have had any options, but they did. I think it has more to do with if that character is touched by destiny in some way. And everybody who we know who has canonically made a choice like this was touched by destiny in some way.